Well, France will not make human rights a condition of its strategic relations with Egypt. That was the message from President Emmanuel Macron as he met his counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Paris. Macron thanked the Egyptian leader for his support following the recent tension between France and several other Muslim countries. Neil O'Reilly reports.
Strategic partners, but an uneasy alliance, at least for President Macron. The French leader welcomed his Egyptian counterpart to the Élysée Palace in Paris to further common aims on a range of issues: terrorism, the conflict in Libya and relations with Turkey. But Macron also had to raise the military ruler's actions against domestic opponents and his country's human rights record.
We are talking about it in an extremely frank manner with President al-Sisi. As we discussed in January 2019, I always try, first of all on principles, to convince that a civil society is, as I said, dynamic, inclusive, where everyone is represented in the agreements that exist, is more protective of any risk of terrorism, even if both our countries have to live with it, more protective than politically repressive.
President al-Sisi also faced a press corps perhaps more at liberty to pose difficult questions than he's used to about Egypt's alleged civil rights violations.
You focus on this issue and you portray us as having no respect for people. As if we don't like our society, or as if we are violent leaders, despots. And this is unacceptable.
Al-Sisi has overseen the severest crackdown on critics of the government in Egypt in living memory. Thousands of Islamists have been jailed, along with pro-democracy activists. An unrelenting campaign that has reversed freedoms won at high cost in the 2011 Arab Spring uprising. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
Well, for more on what was discussed, let's head to Paris and speak to our international correspondent, Annalise Borges. Hello there to you, Annalise. Now, Macron referred to el-Sisi as a friend, which, well, that will no doubt have angered those who would like Macron to do more and push el-Sisi more on human rights.
Absolutely, Isabel. This has been a controversial visit, with human rights organizations accusing France of offering a red carpet welcome to a man they say is ready to repress any kind of dissent. These groups say Egyptian authorities have been waging a campaign to eradicate the human rights movement from the country, with measures that involve asset freezes, but also travel bans, forced disappearances, and even torture. Emmanuel Macron had been urged to exert more pressure on Egypt. But if that press conference between the two presidents is anything to go by, Emmanuel Macron stayed well away from offering any kind of direct criticism to Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He said that he has touched the topic of human rights during their discussions, but according to the French president, conditioning France's deepening ties with Egypt to human rights is counterproductive.
I will not make our cooperation in defence or economic matters conditional on these disagreements. Firstly, because I believe in the sovereignty of peoples and respect our legitimate and reciprocal interests. Secondly, because I believe that it is more effective to have a policy of demanding dialogue than a policy of boycott that would reduce the effectiveness of one of our partners in the fight against terrorism and for regional stability.
And Annalise, Egypt is an important trading partner in terms of defence for France, including crowd control equipment.
Indeed, Isabel, and that is a key point. Up until a few years ago, France was actually Egypt's main weapons supplier. 26% of all weapons exports from France were going to the country. And many of these exports involve, of course, warships and fighter jets, France's famous Rafale, but also armored vehicles. In the meantime, while the French government was selling these weapons, the French companies, with the approval of the administration of Emmanuel Macron, have been selling an increased number of crowd control and surveillance equipment. And that is, of course, part of the problem, where a big part of the problem lies. Critics say that while the weapons can be used in Egypt's fight against terrorism in the region, which is something that Emmanuel Macron says is very important to preserve, a very important guarantor of stability in the region, that is how Emmanuel Macron sees Egypt. At the same time, critics here saying that France is contributing to another fight that Abdel Fattah al-Sisi himself has been waging since staging that military coup back in 2013, a fight to eradicate political Islam from the country. And seeing as how France has now been starting its own war against radical Islam, saying that it wants to limit the political influence the religion has here in this country, seems as though the two presidents have found even more to talk about during this visit. Isabel?
A lot to talk about there. Well, many thanks, Annelise Borges, for us in Paris.